Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us on episode 18 of Health Talk with Dr. Kell. Last week, we started a 4-part series called Inflammation and the Autoimmune Response. We talked about nutritional triggers for inflammation with Dr. Kell and Ted Hahn, a clinical nutritionist. Ted's favorite quote is, "If it doesn't have fins, feathers, fur, or grow out of the earth, don't eat it." A good place to start is to cut down on hard alcohols and sugars, which cause an inflammatory response in the body. Today, in part 2, we will discuss the physical triggers for inflammation in the body, which are injury and infection. Injury is an act that damages or hurts. Examples of injury are abrasions, lacerations, hematomas, broken bones, joint dislocations, sprains, strains, and burns. Most of us have had an injury at some point in our life, whether it was an acute one, which resulted from a single traumatic event such as a car accident or a sports injury, or an overuse injury, which was subtle and occurred over time, like many athletes are experiencing in midlife. Infection occurs when another organism enters your body and causes disease. The organisms that cause infections can include things like viruses, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. If you're living and breathing, you have dealt with an infection in your life. Your immune system is built to recognize and kill all invaders. Today, we will answer the questions: what is inflammation? How does exercise help or hurt the body's immune system? What is going on in the body during exercise? Does injury affect the immune system? And what causes long-term inflammatory conditions such as asthma, colitis, Crohn's disease, arthritis, vasculitis, and nephritis? Let's jump in. Welcome to episode 18 of Health Talk with Dr. Kell. I'm Nikki Sterner, and today we are joined by Dr. Kell and Eric, our producer. Whoop, whoop. Thanks for being with us, Eric.
Yeah.
So today we're going to get started with a quote that I really liked. And that quote is, "The only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today," by Franklin D. Roosevelt. What does that mean to you?
Nikki. What does that mean to me?
Yeah, what does that mean to you?
Stop doubting.
Yeah.
Believe. Have faith that you can succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have these thoughts in our heads that tend to hold us back. I know I have in my life.
All the time. We
Yeah.
all do.
Yeah.
Doubts are constantly showering us throughout the day.
So how do you get rid
to-
of those?
Get a good umbrella.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's a future
There
podcast.
you go. Mental umbrellas. I like that.
There we go.
I like that. All right. Let's also do some health news of the day.
Health news of the day. TBHQ. Do you know what that is, Nikki?
Tell me about it, please.
TBHQ. Tert-butyl-hydroquinone. Did you want to say that?
That's what I was going to say. Tert-butyl-hydroquinone.
Nobody knows what that means.
It's been in the news. Been in the news lately, and it's a concern with immunity because we're talking about immunity today, right?
Yes.
And inflammation. So that's the topic of the day. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this article from the Environmental Working Group recently. And this has been in the news, so maybe our listeners have heard this as well. Since COVID is such a big deal, we're all concerned about the function of our immune system. And here they say a food preservative used to prolong the shelf life of Pop-Tarts, Rice Krispie treats, Cheez-Its, and almost 1,250 other popular processed foods may harm the immune system, according to a new peer-reviewed study by the Environmental Working Group. So it is a concern. And the other concern, the BTHQ is a part of a family of polyfluoroalkyl substances, or referred to as PFAS, PFASS. And these substances are in packaging products all over the place. Many foods are. BTHQ specifically is a preservative put in foods to help prolong the life of foods. These other things, many of the PFAS are used in packaging, and they also have been shown to compromise the immune system, or at least reduce its ability to function.
So what's it doing to your immune system to prevent it from doing its thing?
The process of when something happens. So a pathogen enters your body, or your immune system actually reacts. If a pathogen just breaks the skin, gets through the skin, you'll have an immune response. And you get injured, you'll have an immune response. And in that process, you have the T cells and B cells coming from the bone marrow, typically the long bones of the legs, going up to the thymus, and that's where the T cells specifically are changed. That process slows down, becomes inhibited. It doesn't react as quickly when these substances are flowing through your bloodstream. It's also found, there's studies, let's see here, let me read a couple of things.
Wait. So it slows down your body's ability to go and attack?
for that process to take place, because what happens is those B cells and T cells, the B cells come out of your bones, they go all around your body and start fighting the whatever's coming in. Your T cells are changed in your thymus gland to specific jobs. Some of them are turned into what they do. And we talked about this last week. Ted went into it in detail, so I don't want to go too much into detail again. But in that process, certain substances in our body affect it, slow it down, or there's several steps that take place and different substances created in the body to help fight infection and injury and heal injury. And in that whole process, certain things exposed to in the environment either break links in the process. For instance, Ted talked about how sugar in and of itself attaches to the receptor sites of cells, and then it doesn't allow vitamin C to attach to the cells, and it can lower immunity. So in this case, here we got human epidemiology study shows that PFAS suppress immune function and decrease vaccine efficacy. So vaccines are not working as well. Recently published research has found a link between high levels of PFAS in the blood and the severity of COVID-19 symptoms. So we found that very interesting.
So you're saying by eating Pop-Tarts, I have a better chance of getting COVID?
Rice Krispies?
we you know what? I'm not to declare anything here on the show, other than research shows that it does affect your body's immune system. You know, if you have a very strong immune system, you know, there's bound to be people that get COVID and don't ever have, their body immediately reacts to it. There are no symptoms. Of course, they say out there, they're telling us that those are the carriers. They can carry COVID around without symptoms. Well, we know within 10 days or so that, you know, you don't have any symptoms for the first little while anyway. But some people have very mild symptoms. Some people have no symptoms when they get the virus. And some people have massive reactions to the virus all the way to death, right? So we're just saying and bringing up this information because it's one more thing that affects our immune system. And we want our immune system to be strong. So what is the real answer to all this? Stop eating processed foods as much as you can. Reduce your intake of things that you find. Ted used it last week, and now I can't remember the whole thing. But anyway,
I like
what?
Yeah, feathers, fins, and fur. Right?
I have it.
Yeah, feathers, fins. Oh, did you write that down, Nikki?
I do.
Nikki, you'll find the quote.
Yeah, but I like what he was saying too about the grocery store and staying on the perimeter, right? Because all the good food's for you on the perimeter of the store, and stay out of the middle because that's where all those process.
Absolutely. Here's another tidbit here from this article. It says chemicals linked to health harms can be legally added to packaged foods because the FDA frequently allows food manufacturers to determine which chemicals are safe. Additives like TBHQ were approved by the FDA decades ago, and the agency does not consider new science to reassess the safety of food chemicals. How do you like that one?
Wow.
The EWG, also wanted to mention that about EWG. These guys do a lot of research, and they're really a good group. And EWG Food Scores database helps consumers find products made with healthier alternatives. And our Healthy Living apps allow shoppers to scan products while in stores to choose a better option. So you want to go to EWG. They provide all kinds of information and good for consumer resources. So we'll find a link on our website for that as well.
So they have an app that you can basically scan the product and find out what's in it.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I've used it before.
Oh, you have?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
They also have it for like cosmetic products and toiletries, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
very
great.
good. Very good. That's what I wanted to bring up about that article. Do you guys have any questions about that?
You could do a whole podcast about this.
We could.
Yeah. Makes me rethink some of my Christmas presents to my kids. You know, the big Rice Krispie bar. That's probably not a good one.
one of the reasons they use these substances is because it makes them slipperier. So when they're packaging something, they can move across, it reduces friction. The other reason is it preserves things in the foods, and it also creates a leak-proof barrier. So they'll often put it inside, put it on things like paper, like wax paper, things like that. Your wax paper at home could have some of these substances on it, and you don't know. So make sure you're getting the good stuff. I'm sure the app from EWG will probably tell you if you scan the wax paper product in your grocery store.
Don't eat the paper.
Don't let your babies
Don't
eat it.
eat the paper.
They love the packaging.
We all think that, it's just paper. No big deal. Well, now we know.
All right, so let's go into today's topic, which is exercise and injury, immunity and inflammation in the body. So I'm excited to get into that with you because I think a lot of us tend to have pain throughout our body and we're wondering why. Inflammation may be causing it.
Yes.
Sounds like.
Most of the time in your body, if you feel pain, it's because pressure has been applied to the pain nerve pain receptors, and that pressure is typically caused by inflammation.
And what is inflammation?
Like, for instance, you can pinch yourself or poke yourself and you go, ow. That's because you've just activated the pressure sensors in your nerves. And so if something swells up, a lot of fluid goes to an area, you'll feel more pain. Reduce the pain, get rid of the inflammation.
So inflammation is just a response?
Well, let me read this definition. I like this definition of inflammation here. It says, inflammation is the body's normal response to injuries or infections. You may often hear the words infection and inflammation together, but they mean very different things. Infection refers to the invasion and multiplication of a pathogen within the body, while inflammation is the body's protective response against infection. Inflammation is a complex process involving various types of immune cells, clotting proteins, and signaling molecules, all of which change over time.
Yeah, so like when my son broke his wrist, swelled up because of all those things flowing to the site of injury. Is what you're saying?
Yes, the response, the initial response to the body, whether a pathogen enters the body or you get an injury, is very similar. The body recognizes innately that after an injury or if a pathogen enters, that it needs to go do something. So when a pathogen enters your body, whether it's bacteria, virus, fungus, as they attach to the cells, the cells begin to die or they get altered. And so what the body's immune response does is it goes, if there's an infection occurring, it goes to counter the infection, recognize what that pathogen is, put a marker on it, and then send in the little ninja warriors to kill it. And then it will also start breaking down the injured cells or the dead cells. So in case of an injury, all that's going on to the injury as well, because you're not getting the antigen effect, or you don't need the ninja warriors necessarily immediately unless that injury leads to an infection, which is not uncommon if it's a broken wound or an open wound. But if it's not an open wound and it's internally, it's not associated with a pathogen. It's just damage that the body has to heal. So it follows a similar process, doesn't create all the same things in the process as it would if you had a pathogen enter you, but they are very similar in the process of creating the T cells and the B cells, the white blood cells as they leave the bone marrow. All that is basically that inflammation response is a beginning of the process, whether you're infected by a pathogen or injured. Make sense?
So Nikki brought up breaking a bone, and obviously your arm's going to swell up trying to figure out what's going on there. If I strain a muscle in my back working out or twist my ankle or something like that, is it the same concept where it's coming in there to try to fight that and heal your body?
Yes, and that's an interesting point. Today, a lot of times in sports, professional sports especially, they discovered the quicker they can get the inflammation out of there, the quicker they can get the athlete back performing whatever it is they do.
That's why you're going to ice it immediately, right?
Right.
That's
the ice bath.
We ice. One of the things they found by not doing anything is that inflammation cycle. Sometimes the body doesn't reach its shutoff point properly. T cell suppressors are what shut that system off. And a normal healthy human being should go through the process after an injury, because the body is going through a process of healing and fixing the area that's injured. You shut that process down and now it doesn't heal correctly. But if you're somebody like athletes, for instance, they're injuring themselves all the time. Their system's working on overdrive all the time. They tend to, especially professional athletes, at least most of them try to eat in a healthy way, although maybe their first years when I'm an athlete and go out partying all the time isn't so good. We hear all those stories, right? The point is that the initial phase of inflammation is very important and very important to the healing process. You don't want to immediately shut it down. The reason we throw ice on it, the reason we do deep tissue work to get the inflammation out of there is because what we talked about a few minutes ago. You get rid of the inflammation, the pain goes away. So guess what happens to an athlete when his pain? You get rid of that pain really quick because you flush that inflammation out of there fast. Now what?
You go back to working out.
You go back working out on something that isn't healed completely. Especially with professional athletes, they're all about winning the game. And so they want to get that guy out there winning the game, and then if they can get the pain gone now, even if they're going out there injuring themselves maybe even a little more, but if they can get out there and they're not hurting, they can still do all the stuff they're supposed to be doing, and that's why they get paid the big bucks, right?
Yeah. Sacrifice the player to win the game, right?
Right, and so that one game really matters, and so if that wins that game, so they're I don't totally understand the psychology behind all of it, but obviously part of it is they figure they can then rehab the person after the game's over and work through it that way.
So you're saying if I do get injured, wait for the inflammation to come in, subside, and then ice a day later that night?
Well, when you go to a trainer or to a physical therapist, even a chiropractor, after an injury, they're going to tell you to put ice on it. That's just the standard, okay? Because it reduces pain. Its actual physiological effect is probably not as beneficial as you might think. But yeah, if you're finding that within the first 24 to 48 hours, if you want to follow the process and deal with the pain, which most of us don't because we're all kind of wimpy. Do I ice after an injury? Yeah, I admit it. I try to avoid taking anti-inflammatories, but hey, if you can't stand it, you do what you got to do. Pain, they say, is one of the most significant things that we will pay anything to get rid of.
Yeah.
In fact, there was times where years and years and years ago, they'd go in and cut those nerves that were feeding the pain fibers of people with chronic pain, only to discover it was pretty difficult to just hit the pain fibers.
I was thinking, wow, that might be kind of cool. But it didn't work, huh?
And the day may come where science goes on to a point to where, what are we doing with analgesics and different drugs and things? It's inhibiting those pain fibers. Will they figure out a way, some way to where well, the other drawback to that, though, there's been people out there born with very few or no pain fibers in their body. They don't tend to live very long.
Oh, yeah.
Pain,
risk takers.
Really, seriously, you're exactly right. So that's a concern as well.
So what is the cycle of that inflammation and all that? When should I ice then? Is there an ideal time period?
Well, I'm not going to tell anybody not to ice right away because that's the standard.
Yeah.
But if you really want to go through what's probably natural for your body, I'd give it 42 to 72 hours. If the inflammation isn't going away by then, yeah, use some ice. But usually the initial phase, especially if it's an internal injury, will cycle through that. And ultimately, the body will take care of everything, heal it properly, and then you go on. The chronic inflammation can cause things like myofascial adhesions, and I don't know that we really talked much about that before, a little bit, but that's where the inflammatory process doesn't shut off completely, or the tissues as they heal. I personally believe, though I can't prove this and haven't taken the time or looked into it significantly enough, but I think part of the reason those adhesions form is because of the way we treat the injury today, where we don't let it fully go through its cycle. We try to shut it off and shut it down too soon. And then I believe that one of the things that you get there is a chronic mild inflammation because the system hasn't totally shut down or shut off like it should have. And one of the reasons we do what's called myofascial therapy, where you do deep kneading of the muscle, where you have an adhesion, which is basically the tissues all sticking together, almost kind of like an internal scar. And there will be a scar inside of very hard tissue if you tore it, like you would, you can get a gash in the outside of skin. You can actually tear the muscle fibers internally, and then they got to heal. When they heal with harder tissue. And so by getting in there, if there's pain, you get in there and work through that. And it's not very fun therapy, though we have tools and devices today that reduce the pain that used to exist when you were doing those forms of therapy, that break up those adhesions and also stop that chronic inflammatory process from going on.
So we're talking about physical triggers for inflammation, and we've talked about injury. Let's talk about exercise. How does exercise help or hurt the body's immune system and the response?
Big thought for many people. The research shows that 20, 30 minutes of mild to moderate exercise today is very good for the immune system. One of the things that occur when you begin to exercise is it actually causes an increased production in the white blood cell count within the first 90 minutes or so to 3 hours after you finish exercising like that. You'll maintain those levels. And what's interesting is you've increased your blood flow throughout the body. So now all those little immune fighters are spread out throughout the body and sitting there waiting. For instance, you think of innate benefit. Let's say I go out and exercise. What am I saying to my body internally when I begin exercising? When the heart starts pumping faster, the blood starts flowing throughout the body, I'm kind of giving my body a warning, because when do injuries most often occur? When you're doing that. So physical. It's the body's preparing for a potential injury or a entry of a pathogen. So and that's innately why it does that. And so those little bug and injury fighters are spread out throughout your body for about 3 hours after exercise ends. It is very important to your immune system to have a daily form of exercise. And again, it's recommended through research 20 to 30 minutes a day. I would say 5-6 days max. You do need a break. You do need to rest here and there in between.
So is there such a thing as too much exercise?
Well, we had Gina, Running with Gina. She was on the show a few episodes ago, and we kind of talked about that a little bit. Gina mentioned that she's feeling sick. She'll go out and run. I don't recommend that. We didn't tell her that during the podcast, but
it depended on the illness too. If you've got stomach issues, she's not saying go out and run. Right. But if you're feeling a little sick, like maybe a little nauseous, or you think you're coming down with a bug, it's not an uncommon thing. And they do claim, runners claim that they can feel better. So I suppose if you're just getting a sense of I'm not feeling just quite right, maybe going out and doing some light exercise might not be a bad idea, because it does trigger your immune response. So from that perspective, I could see where it could be beneficial if you get it right in the beginning stages. But if you're like been laying in bed and you're like, I got to get up and run because I have been laying in this bed for 2-3 days, I don't recommend it at that point. If you're on week 2 of COVID, maybe don't go run a marathon.
Yes. I always go back to Jack LaLanne. That's what killed him. He went out and he was feeling sick and would not, and had his was more severe. He had pneumonia, but he still went out and did his normal routine, and that was just too much for his heart. Comes back to use common sense. But I wanted to compare, since we mentioned Gina, marathon runners. Research, for a while there, they thought that marathon runners' extensive exercise and prolonged exercise was damaging the immune system. More research has been done to show that may not be the case. One of the reasons marathon runners, they've called off all these marathons around the country because of COVID. One of the reasons they did that is because think about what goes on at a marathon. You got thousands of people all grouped tightly together in a small area right before the race starts.
We've been just watching too.
Yeah,
that's true.
Spectators, everybody. They're all there together, and they're all breathing, and they're all spreading whatever germs they're carrying in their body. And as an adult, most of those things that are spreading all around you, you've already been affected by and got immunity to, but the new stuff, is there. So that's why. So the other issue that they've discovered and thought about is the psychology behind it. Stress can lower your immune system, and we're going to talk about that in another podcast. But there's a lot of stress involved in those same kinds of events. Just think about, Gina said we joked about her being able to review her tired life while running a marathon, or things like that.
She reviews her life as she's running to kind of pass the time, just something to do.
Yeah, she said that's the biggest problem with running a marathon. Typically, is it's kind of a boring activity, and your brain is free to think, while you're running, because your body's just automatically going through the motions, and it can be very boring. And so she recommends people come up with things to think about or go through, pass the time.
Listen to podcasts.
She mentioned on her first marathon too, she passed like an ER, and then she passed the cemetery. And
jeez.
Like, where's this going?
Got her a little concerned. So stress, right? It made her stressed out, wondering, because she was not feeling well. And she had also had the stress fractures in her feet, so she was in pain.
Oh, ouch.
So there you go. With that, if you're a marathon runner, if you want to protect yourself when you go to run the marathon, maybe you want to wear the mask, though I'm not convinced about the full benefit of masks. No, I'm just saying if you're gonna, no, you want to take the mask off once you get going, because breathing through that mask is not going to be good. However, when you're sitting there surrounded by thousands of people, if you're worried about anything, try to protect yourself in some way or another, because you're stuck in there, so you're exposed to whatever's there. That's the only thing that might reduce somewhat your exposure. Other than that, and try to do something to psychologically for yourself to keep in a good mood, to reduce your stress as much as possible, because those are the things that appear, not so much the exercise or the long-term exercise, but all the things you're exposed to during that long-term exercise, the physiological effects and psychological effects that may help contribute to the compromise or lowering of your immune response.
You mean like, why am I running this far?
Yeah, if you start psychologically, I'm sure for many people, especially if it's their first marathon, when they get to the end, the last few miles can be very grueling, especially if they're in a lot of pain.
I can imagine.
Or their breathing is, difficult, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That in itself causes psychological effects and suppression of the system.
Does injury affect the immune system?
Yes, and we kind of talked a little bit about that, but that's what that injury triggers the immune response, and so that's what's the body's sending all those white blood cells there to. When you get an injury, there's cells dying, so it's sending stuff there to eat the cells, get rid of the waste. And in the case of an injury, as opposed to a pathogen, the body's not treating the tissue as if it needs to kill anything. It's not going there to kill any cells.
So when you get injured, and so say you got injured and then you got sick, is your body so focused on the injury that it's not able to take care of the invader?
Yeah, you can overload your system.
It's an overload.
And that's a concern, I think, of the marathon runner, too, is overloading the system. When someone becomes really affected toward the end of the race and exhausted, then they're exhausted because they've depleted their energy stores, not so much that they've affected the function of the white blood cells, but the fact that they're weaker, the system becomes weaker, the organs are depleted too of their nutrients and all that, then all of a sudden, yes, they become, I would say, more susceptible to any pathogens that might enter the body. So in the case of an injury, if you have an injury and then are exposed to a pathogen, if the body's in the process of correcting the injury, depending on how it's affecting your immune system, if it's really overloaded trying to fix the injury, then you would be more susceptible to that pathogen. However, because during an injury, the ninja cells that are there to kill the pathogens really have been at rest that whole time. Now they get to go to work. So they're there and fresh, ready to go. It just really depends. To someone who already has a compromised immune system, they're going to be affected by it much more than someone who's healthy.
I was thinking, but this might be a future episode for inflammation. Where does stress fall in there? Because somebody who's like working a lot and stressed out, and then all of a sudden, bam, they come down with this really,
Well, it is tied to the physical
virus
because emotions affect all the processes in the body. And if the emotions are good, they actually benefit the function of the body. If the emotions are negative, they do the opposite. They actually suppress the immune system. But the side of pain, what occurs is when most people carry you always, I got all my stress in my shoulders, around my neck. And that is a common place. What happens as you're dealing with anxiety, your sympathetic nervous system is kicked in. So your adrenaline levels have increased. You're overtaxing your adrenal glands. And you get muscle spasm occurring. During that spasm causes inflammation, twitching in the eye.
I get that.
Yes.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Ding, ding,
And twitching in the eye is a common one with people who are too stressed out. And so those muscles become activated, the nervous system, everything is activated. And so that draws more fluid to an area and does cause swelling in the area. Chronic swelling in the trapezius muscles of the shoulder is very common to someone who's stressed out a lot, and the paraspinal muscles of the neck.
So what about long-term chronic inflammatory conditions such as asthma, colitis?
Yeah, see the chronic inflammation, we've been talking about acute inflammation so far. Chronic inflammation is, and acute inflammation is when it...
Short-term.
Short-term chronic is, what happens is the inflammatory process in the body doesn't shut off. The T suppressor cells that are created by the body, either, it's still, chronic inflammation is still being researched heavily. They've come up with a lot of drugs that alter symptoms, but nothing that really works to the sense where it boosts the body's T cell function to shut down the process. So only guessing here, a conclusion to all the things I've read is that as that process takes place, something's inhibiting the T cells. Not only does it not shut down, it is amplified. So now it treats certain parts of your own body as foreign substances and tries to destroy them. So basically, it's like, for instance, when you get a pathogen in your body, the white blood cells, they go at work, and a certain part of those white blood cells recognize the antigen or the pathogen, and they put a marker on it. So then the killer T cells, the little ninja cells, can recognize, hey, destroy that. So in the case of your immune system or some of these autoimmune diseases, the what's happening is the system is actually putting markers on healthy cells, and then the little ninja guys are coming around and start killing the good cells.
Are you talking about autoimmune?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so the your body's basically beginning to kill itself, and little cell by cell. Fortunately, you got millions of them, and the body's constantly producing new ones. So it's not typically an instant death, but it is a process that's occurring. And they've created drugs to try to stop the process, but most of it's a Band-Aid.
Do you honestly believe that the body is attacking itself, or do you think that there's something in there that it's attacking?
Well, it is attacking itself. It is. That's a good question, though. Is there something hidden in there they're not recognized? Is it still present?
Right.
I don't know why it couldn't be a possibility, but something's causing the system to not shut off, and other things are causing the system to be amplified. In the case of a myofascial adhesion, it's a case of not fully shutting down, but it's in a mild state. In the case of diseases like, as you know, we can talk about some Crohn's disease, arthritis, nephritis. Those are things diseases where the system not only doesn't shut down, it's now amplified.
Yeah.
The natural solution to an autoimmune problem, and one of the reasons I believe that autoimmune problems begin and continue, is because your body's unhealthy. The system's not working like it should. You've altered it because you've been eating poorly for years, or you've been exposed to environmental toxins. Something has trashed your system and made it weak, and so now when it's trying to function, it kicks into a state of dysfunction. More and more research is showing, though, a big part of immunity and autoimmunity, and Ted talked about this last week, was dysfunction of the gastrointestinal tract, or the gut, and mainly, specifically, the large and small intestine. The stomach is a big one, though, too, because people are constantly doing stupid things like taking antacids.
Apologize.
I apologize.
Right now.
You're not stupid. You're just doing what you've been told to do.
That's right.
And you find some benefit from it because it does reduce stomach acid and the burning does go down, but it actually long term is damaging your system even more. The answers to correcting your gut acid is one of the reasons you have the reflux and the problems you do is because your body is not it's not producing the acid properly. The function of the cells in your stomach that produce the acids are dysfunctioning. You're not getting enough acid, which that means you're not digesting your food quickly enough, which means it sits in your stomach longer than it should, which means then you burp it up and you get acid reflux and burning in your throat or pain in your stomach. So you throw in an antacid, that reduces the acid even more, which slows down your digestive process even more. Mm-hmm. But because the acid levels are lower, you burp and you don't get the burning. And that's really what you're after, because you've got the acid reflux, you've irritated your esophagus, and so your throat is burning all the time after eating a fatty or high protein meal, because those are the two things that the process of breaking those down, it begins in the stomach, and when it is slowed down, then you get the spasm of the stomach muscles, you get the reflux into your throat, and you get the burning. And as we said before, people will do anything to get rid of pain, so reach for the antacid. But if you really want to fix the problem, that's not the answer. The answer is to eat healthy, get rid of the processed foods in your diet, don't eat heavy fat and protein meals, a lot of it at once, and as you heal yourself through proper eating, that whole process begins to heal as well. There are a lot of natural supplements out there that help increase the stomach acid in your stomach, which speeds up the digestive process in your stomach and moves the food out faster. We dispense those to patients all the time and have great success with that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, is that the Zypan?
Zypan is one of those, by standard process.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is really interesting. So I have somebody in my life, I'm not going to mention who they are because they might listen to this someday and I don't want them to be embarrassed, but they have been overweight for most of their life, and they're on all these trending diets, South Beach diet, Atkins diet, keto diets, and they're always trying to lose weight and eat all these interesting ways. And you describe this, they've had all those problems. They have tons of indigestion problems. They have tons of acid buildup, and they're taking all these Tums and things like that to try to get rid of that pain. just they're not on a natural path to try to heal this stuff, so they go see doctors, and doctors are prescribing all these crazy things for them, and it's just...
Well, no, Eric, no, don't put down the doctors.
Sorry.
They're doing the best they can.
Their list of prescriptions
Yeah.
keeps growing.
But the
Yeah.
prescriptions
And-
are causing issues.
And they're just not able to eat anything, and now it's just
Oh.
like once they consume anything, I mean, even oatmeal, it's just like right through their body, and it just
Oh,
destroys
wow.
everything in
Yeah,
there. And
they've
every time
trashed
they
their whole
eat-
digestive
yeah.
process.
And so, like, they are fearful of eating, but they have to eat, obviously, to stay alive. But every meal of the day, it's just, like, they're down for a couple hours after that. And
Wow.
It's
It's
hard
a
to see
battle.
that, yeah. And
Think what that's doing to their immune system.
Yeah. I mean, they're in their mid-30s, and
Oh.
this is what they're going through right now.
Yeah,
That's
most
stressful.
people, it's funny. They say only about 50% of the population will go see a chiropractic doctor or a nutritionist or acupuncturist. All the alternative healthcare people, naturopaths, etc. We treat certain conditions in the body a little differently in each alternative way. But when it comes back to nutrition and the function of the body, we're all under the same understanding of how that works. And all these people are getting good training. And so my point being there is with only roughly 15% of the population going to see these types of people, a lot of people only go see them when they're on their last leg.
Okay.
They are dealing with the problems that Eric just described, and now they're in a state of, I will virtually try anything. And we got a lot of those patients. They've tried everything else. Didn't work for them. So now they're here in our office, and I'd say 90+% we get good success with. There are people that, I hate to say it, sometimes people reach a point of such extreme illness, they're beyond help.
Yeah.
Their gastrointestinal tract is so damaged, it's tough to fix. So if you're having problems, get in and see somebody now. Don't wait until you're so sick that
Your
maybe
last
you can't.
resort, yeah.
But even I remember hearing a story years ago about a woman who she had small intestine issues, and even to the point to where a small part of her intestine got sick and died. So the doctors went in and cut out that section. And literally over the next 10 years, until she died, they kept taking pieces of her intestine out because it kept dying. And she never got to a point. Finally, she came or went to someone who could help her nutritionally, but by then, though everything that was done helped them improve, ultimately the system collapsed. And I don't remember exactly what the official diagnosis was, but she had reached a state where she wasn't, that small intestine is where all those little micronutrients are entering your body and then going into the liver, through the liver, and then out to the rest of your system through the bloodstream. And she wasn't able to absorb, and that's the other issue too. A lot of people don't understand when they decide to make a change and go on a new diet, a new program, and try to get healthy. It takes a while. It can take, really 3 to 6 months to. A lot of people feel better fairly quickly within, sometimes within 2-3 days they notice a difference. But a real change in actual function of your internal systems takes a long time. As you're eating better, you're restoring your good flora in your gut, and that's so important in your immune system. If your gut is overloaded with bad microbes, then it affects your immune system to the point, because that creates chronic inflammation in the system. So now what you've done is you kicked in your immune system to run all the time, and it's overloaded. Which then makes you more susceptible to catching bugs and also recovering from an injury, because your system is, if your intestinal tract is in a chronic state of inflammation, that's one of the reasons why your immune system doesn't shut down. Because, for instance, let's say on your arm, let's say I cut my arm today, put a little cut on my arm, and then it started healing, and then I cut myself again in another spot, and then it started healing, cut it myself in another spot. It started healing. All of a sudden, I got several things happening at once, and it's harder for the body to deal with it. So anyway,
Overloaded.
It's so important that you keep that health process going, restore your normal flora, keep things healthy in your gut, and the rest of it, and keep putting in the healthy stuff. The rest of it will work normally. Like I said when I was speaking with Ted, that I'm not a big veggie eater. I don't broccoli. I don't care for the much taste of broccoli or asparagus. I like carrots and celery and lettuce and tomatoes and cucumbers and those kinds of things. But there's certain things I don't really care for that have good nutrients in them. So I get them through my supplements.
But I like that because you don't have to eat everything. You can supplement.
Yeah, it is
still
more
survive.
expensive.
Yeah.
It is more expensive. But yeah, you can do that. But again, just because you're eating those supplements doesn't mean you can go out and eat all the crap. Although I like when you consider 7 days in a week, I like the rule of if you gotta have some junk in your diet, and for most of us we do. There are a small minority that we all hate that are strong all the time, and they don't have to have any sweets ever or any of those other things that we consider junk food. I would recommend to people, if you're a little bit like me, and I kind of follow this in my own way, and maybe it doesn't give me optimum health. When you consider the ideas of good, better, and best, I'd say it's the better one. It's not the best way, but it's the better way. And then you got the good way, which is a little less. But you got 7 days in a week. I would say 5 out of those 7 days, focus on eating healthy. 1, 2 other days in the week, if you got to have a little bit, it's probably okay. But it shouldn't be the other way around, where you're trying to eat good for 2 days a week and 5 days a week eating crap. That's not gonna make up the difference. Somebody who's really good, they're eating good every day, all day. They don't need the garbage anymore. And I got to say, I've had times in my life where I've, like I talked about before, eating a lot of junk when I was a kid. And I have to admit, there have been small bouts throughout my life where, due to extreme stressors in my life, I tended to eat more garbage food. And that is a common thing too for people, because it tends to give them a feeling of feeling a little better for a short time. Mm-hmm. But guess what? If you eat a solid diet of fruits and vegetables, and what we talked about before last week, if you can have a diet of roughly 75% fruits and vegetables and grains, and then 20-25% of meat proteins, you're on target. You're doing well, and you try to make those as organic as you can, and the meats, as I always say, fish is top number one. If you just had fish and no other meats, you're getting the healthiest meat protein possible, although now today all our concerns are what's happening in the oceans.
Yeah, heavy metals, right? You gotta be concerned about that.
Yeah.
There is a concern there, so once again I would follow the same rule of 25%, but still I believe, they do lots of testing and studying of the content of the heavy metals in the fish. Again, they say the mercury, for instance, that is found in tuna, which is the number one issue because it's a neurological problem that can really affect your immune system if you get an overabundance of mercury in you. If you eat a lot of tuna all the time, and that's 80% of your diet, or other types of fish, then be concerned. But I wouldn't eat farm raised. Not just because of the way they feed them and their lack of, they're corralled.
What do they feed them?
Farm-raised tuna?
Farm-raised fish.
Okay.
Salmon is a big one. A lot of people don't even realize. I'll never buy farm-raised salmon.
Why is that?
Is it better than eating nothing? Sure. People can argue with me that, hey, it's still okay to eat. Go ahead. I don't care. You eat whatever you want. I'm not going to.
Pop-Tarts?
Better than Pop-Tarts. But what was your question, Nikki? I'm sorry.
What do they feed the farm-raised fish?
They feed them little pellets of nutrients. To be honest, I don't know exactly what the nutrients on there, but chances are they're not the best. And maybe we'll have to look that up and share that on a future.
So it's kind of like
podcast, specifically what's in fish pellets. But its coloring is in there. They color it. A lot of people don't know that farm-raised salmon, the meat when you cut it open is gray, so they have to add coloring to it to turn it red to make it look like regular salmon.
But they're not having heavy metals in that.
Most of these farms, are in the ocean. They're cordoned off area in an ocean in a bay where they. I
was just thinking like SeaWorld,
where they raise them.
Fish.
Yeah.
there are those too. Tilapia. I remember when I lived in Colorado, in central Colorado, they had a really cool place. If you're ever in central Colorado, go see the tilapia fish farm. It's kind of cool. We'll put a link. We'll find a link for them on our website. But it's kind of cool. They have alligators and tilapia. They raise tilapia in all these ponds. And you know what? I wouldn't eat the tilapia, but it was kind of fun to go to the farm.
But the alligators.
The alligators were there because they would eat the waste, and the alligators are what you want to go see. Of course, those are the cool parts. In fact, we have a picture of us and our kids holding a little baby alligator. Mm-hmm. It was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Did you do the picture where they do it toward the camera, where the gator looks like really huge?
I don't remember, but probably this was many years ago. So you guys have been
We've
to
done
one of those.
One in Florida, yeah.
Gator World. right?
Yeah, they're cool. But it's weird because alligators in Colorado. I think they're the only alligators in Colorado. But they imported they imported the alligators, and they said it was kind of difficult to do apparently because they're who wants alligators in Colorado? But obviously, it's interesting where the pools are, where they raise the fish and have the alligators is their hot springs, and so they're getting hot water from the ground to maintain the temperature in the ponds because tilapia is a tropical fish. So tilapia aren't natural to Colorado either.
Oh my gosh.
So, funny stuff.
Huh.
Funny
I
stuff.
wonder who created that.
Yeah.
That's well thought out.
So any other questions regarding immunity, guys?
Yeah, we're way off topic here.
No, but that was kind of fun to talk about. It might be more interesting to our listeners than inflammation.
Physical triggers. Anything else we need to know about? So we've talked about the body's response to exercise and how it shoots out all of its messengers when you exercise for 2 or 3 hours.
Ninjas.
Right?
No,
It's ninjas, yes.
No,
Karate.
No. Yeah, they stay active in your body and your extremities for 2 to 3 hours after about 20, 30 minutes of exercise.
Okay. And then you can exercise too much, so there's kind of a fine line.
Yeah, you don't want to weaken yourself so that you're so tired and weak after a workout. That's the time that your system is its weakest. So if you're going to go, like the bodybuilders go, and they I remember listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger once who mentioned how after a workout, doing a leg workout, that it was hilarious to watch him bicycle home because he had no strength left in his legs. So that actually, though, you're reaching a point to where you're now a little more susceptible if you're exposed to a pathogen because your system is in overload already because the white blood cells are already extremely active trying to heal that area where you've gotten micro tears throughout the muscles after workout.
So let me ask you this. So let's just talk middle of the road. If you have somebody who works out 3 or 4 times a week, what's kind of an average workout time for them? Obviously, 4 or 5 hours in the gym is way too much. 10 minutes probably not
Well,
enough.
for me, I have to admit I put on a few pounds and not been in the gym since COVID started. In fact, it was funny. I decided to switch gyms. I was going to switch gyms right before COVID hit, and I just canceled my membership at one place, but hadn't started at another, and then now I've just been home. And I do exercise at home, run, walk around the block, bicycle, but have not been doing it as strongly as I should have been. But for that person, your question again, Eric?
So
I'm sorry.
So not the super athlete and not the couch potato, but middle of the road, 3 or 4 times a week. Like, what's an ideal length of workout for them?
Oh, I'd say an hour's fine.
An hour, yeah.
If
Like
you're
maybe 20 minutes cardio.
Yeah,
40 minutes of
mix it up. I wouldn't. If you're the weightlifter guy, there's so many different ways people are doing it today. I think I remember Schwarzenegger would go in and he'd spend many hours in the gym.
Yeah.
But you've got bodybuilders that go in now. They'll do 45 minutes in the morning. Maybe they'll go back 45 minutes in the evening, or change it up on days and not have days where they don't work out and just do really extreme exercise in that short amount of time, and that's enough. And they're taking all these supplements and maybe getting some added HGH or other illegal things that they shouldn't be putting in their bodies. But funny enough, just a brief to mention, those things do improve your immune system function, or the process of healing occurs faster when you're on those kinds of things. Of course, it's being artificially done, so now your system is reacting to that artificial stimulation as well. However, it does speed up the process. It speeds up the process of your bone releasing those white blood cells, blood cells getting to the thymus and off to heal the injury. And the whole healing process actually speeds up, and that's why these guys, when they're on steroids, are able to work out without as many rest days as someone who's not.
So we're going to start like
they heal faster.
A black market supplement company for healing.
Yeah, for healing.
And that's one of the reasons that doctors give steroids to patients. They get steroid shots, but the doctor's prescribing it, so then it's legal. The other guy's getting it from Mexico, or some other place or lab that's dispensing it illegally. But it does work. Problem is it causes damage to tissue, and one is the heart tissue. And Arnold Schwarzenegger had a I thought it was funny when he years ago he had a heart surgery, and I don't remember them actually linking it to the steroids, but. It's a common problem.
Interesting.
Common problem with people who do steroids to have those kinds of organ issues later in life because it's just overloading the system. Yeah. It's boosting the system to work at its optimum level, almost it's just too much for the system, especially long-term use of those types of substances. Anyway.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah,
Please.
Yeah, because we all like to. We all want to know.
Yes, I've been wanting to try
Actually,
those.
we'll talk. You know what? We're going to talk about those when we have the gym owner come in and
There you
interview
go.
him.
Yeah, there you go. Definitely.
Because he's very knowledgeable in regard to that. Because I know he's got lots of athletes who come into his gym that are under the
Pumped up?
effects of those. Yes,
substances.
pumped up. There you go, pumped up.
That's right.
Anyway,
All right, so we've also discussed injury. We're talking about acute exercise injury and then also the chronic inflammation throughout the body.
yes,
Any takeaways for our listeners today?
I think we've covered it all. Frankly, unless Eric or you have any more questions, I think we've covered the topic pretty well. We're going to continue to talk about immunity on the next podcast related to we slightly touched on it related to stress and immunity.
Okay.
And so we'll pick that up next time. And thanks so much for letting me talk.
Yeah, thanks for explaining everything to us today. And Eric, thanks for being with us.
Yes,
This
we
is
finally
exciting.
we've been trying to talk Eric into joining the show for several episodes now because he
Yes.
always has great questions, and so we're happy to have Eric join the show. And he's our producer, but he'll definitely he's here to stay. So
That's
thanks
for
for
sure.
listening.
Can't
He's our
silence
pod-
me anymore.
He's our podcast
In fact,
expert.
Eric, for your
so-
first time on the show, did you want to say anything to the
Yeah,
listeners?
why don't you tell them about yourself?
It's on the spot. I have nothing to say except thanks for listening, and hopefully my voice sounds amazing here. So yeah,
I'm sure it does. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here.
And
Thanks for
Eric,
jumping
try
in.
not to get don't go back and forth on the mic.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he's as a producer, he's constantly telling us things we need to do to sound better and perform better. We're serious here. I'm
Can I
sorry, that
play the
wasn't the
producer
right word.
next week?
Although Nikki's a performer, right? Nikki. People don't know she's an actress.
Oh, I'm well known.
They,
Just look me up.
You can find her on Facebook.
Yeah.
Nikki Sterner.
Totally. I'm sure you already know me, though.
But she is, as far as we're concerned, she is a celebrity and becoming more so every day with this podcast.
That's right. In my mind. Yep.
Yes, we're all legends in our own mind.
Legends in our own mind.
Yes, and that's where it should be.
That's right. It
Now,
all
if you-
starts there.
If you can't believe you're a
Positive.
legend in your own mind, how do you expect to become a legend to millions?
That's right.
What's it say? If you believe it, you can achieve it, right?
That's right. Goes
That's
back to, can you read that quote one last time?
Sure. The only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today.
Fits right in.
It does, that's a great way to end. Thanks for listening, everybody, today. We look forward to continuing this topic next week on inflammation in the body and immunity. If you learned something, please tag a friend or family member. All right, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Don't forget oceanbaynaturals.com.
While we make every effort to broadcast correct information, we are still learning. We will double check all facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor may have a different way of doing things from another. We are simply presenting our views on how to live a healthy lifestyle that will be as evidence-based as possible. We welcome any comments, suggestions, or corrections of errors. We take no money from drug or device companies. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast. Under no circumstances shall Dr. Kell Fullerton or any guests or any contributors to the podcast or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Dr. Kell Fullerton be responsible for damages arising from use of this podcast. This blog should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis of expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. Our website, blog, and podcasts are all HIPAA compliant. While you may give your email address to subscribe to the website post or to post information on the website blog, we will never share your email address or contact information with any third parties without your explicit permission. The contents of Health Talk with Dr. Kell podcast and the show notes are all copyrighted. All blog posts, podcasts, and show notes that are distributed to the public for free can be redistributed via hard copy or electronic copy for free only if Health Talk with Dr. Kell is included as the acknowledged author within the actual media that is being redistributed. The Health Talk with Dr. Kell podcast is a production of the Orange Stack, with executive producers Dr. Kell Fullerton and Eric Hammond and hosts Nikki Sterling.